And we're rolling. Hello, Cory.
Hello, Sean.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Sitting in the office, so just hanging out by myself, luckily, so there aren't people walking behind me. One, I want to thank you for doing this. It's very generous of you to lend your time to a nascent video chat series on YouTube. And two, I want to thank everybody who's actually tuning in to watch this chat. If it's your first time here, thank you very much. If you're a returning member, thank you very much. And for everybody, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that as we post new videos each week, you'll get alerted to that and you'll be able to watch. For those of you who don't know, my name is Sean O'Rourke. I'm a cyber liability consultant, which means I prepare companies to be hacked. And I want to toss it over to a friend who I can actually say we have been friends for decades now, which is a really sad thing. Well, not a sad thing. It's a good thing to say, but it's just amazing how time flies. So take it away, Cory. Tell everybody who you are.
That's really scary, actually. It's true. Although I may not look decades
Oh,
old.
no. You haven't changed a bit since college.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've known each other. I'm Cory Allison, and my background, briefly, I have been in tech world for most of my life, I feel like. But in the last decade or so, I've been in startups, and my true heart is a entrepreneur. I believe that's where my heart lies. But I have been a VC for a while, and I am learning a lot about how to navigate through, having those conversations about funding and how to raise money, how to invest in companies. So I get to see both sides, which I believe is helpful for me as an entrepreneur and as an investor. So,
which is why you're on this episode of Did You Know That? ? Because you do have a very unique history. You've been somebody who needed to raise money. You've been somebody who folks have come to you for money. And we've had discussions about the various options or ways startups can get money. So to that end, let's take it from the entrepreneur's standpoint. They have an idea for a business. They've done let's say they've done some market research, because we all know most of us just sort of dive in on that front. If they're going to raise money, what do you do? Where do you start? How do you figure out what kind of money to get?
Yeah, and I think that's tricky because obviously it depends on the industry, but
sure.
And what you're doing, whether you're a product company, service company, of course, health, you name it. And since I have raised money in the past, I'm a little jaded, because raising money is not just difficult, but it just really puts a whole new spin on your startup, I think. So as an entrepreneur, just to really talk about my last big raise that I have done, with angels and VCs, it changes the course of your direction. I mean, truly. So entrepreneurs raising money, you have to think you're bringing in somebody else's money. Their bottom line is they want to return. So whatever it takes to make a return is what they're looking for most of the time. It's very difficult to let others truly understand your vision and your mission and where you want to take your company clearly, and you can stay on that course together for a long time. At some point, they really just want to return. So you have to take that very seriously. I think that, you bootstrap as long as you can. I mean, that's my number one advice when somebody comes to me and, they want to learn about the jump fund that, we have, that I'm involved with. Then I would say, what are you doing and what have you invested? How much can you add to the pot and how long can you last? So I really stress that bootstrapping as the best course of option as long as they can. Obviously you can't. At some point, you start a business and you have a great product or service and you think you need to scale and you need some financial support, then that's when you start looking for other options. And now I think more than ever, there are many other options besides, taking somebody else's money in ways that were typically just VC funding or, series raising. What I really liked, for the last few years that I've seen is debt financing. So, get your product and service to a point where you really can't show some revenue options or revenue sources, and then try to look for debt financing. That way you're not giving up your equity, that you've already proven, there is something, and you're looking for ways to keep the control of your company, and you're trying to scale your company in a way that you can actually manage. So I really enjoy seeing more and more debt financing options. Crowdfunding, another way that you can do, especially if you're, a product company, I think it's a little bit easier, and that's always good. But there are a lot of options.
So
I do.
let me stop you there just for a quick second, because this is an area that obviously I had my own company and we bootstrapped. We took no money, really took no debt. We bootstrapped, but we were a service business.
Yeah.
You've run a service business. You're now running a product business. When it comes to debt financing, I like that option as well. I'm a big fan of debt. Much in the Alexander Hamilton mode. Not too much debt, obviously, but I do like debt much better for a number of reasons. But when is that tipping point, do you think, again, this is all general conversation, as to when you can actually go out and look for debt? And where do you go? Because a traditional bank usually is not going to give a very young company any kind of debt financing.
Right. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's very difficult to get debt financing if you don't have revenue. I mean, nobody's going to give you money for without even a stake in your company if you don't have any revenue coming in. So yes, there's definitely something that you have to tangibly have. For example, POs or intent letters and whatever it is that you can show that you help me, and then I can bring in money to pay you back. Because that
Right.
a lot of the debt financing options, you have a very it's a shorter term payback, unlike
Like a
typical
mortgage.
VC. That right.
Yeah.
So that is tricky, but I would, again, as much as you can as a company, looking back with all those little companies or small business that I've run in the past 20 years, I feel like you really do have an opportunity to kind of grow and learn about the industry, what you're going after better when your finances are in control, like you're in control of that, rather than having it put it on
Excuse
the
me,
table.
1 second. Say hi to Colleen.
Hello. Oh. So yeah, I really think I was a different person once I really took on others' money in a
Right.
way that it truly it took me in a different path. It really did. And maybe that was one of my weaknesses, because I felt like now I was serving more than my customers, more than my employees. It was a whole nother, pillar that I had to really juggle, and that was overwhelming.
So do you think by taking on the investment version as opposed to the debt, do you think you focused too much on making sure that the company was going to be able to return that money within the given
Oh
time
yeah,
frame? Okay.
yeah, and I do believe most of founders and startup entrepreneurs have the decency and the heart and truly want to pay people back, right? Their investors and family and friends. but some do take it. It is easier once you have all that money. It's like you got to spend it, right? You got
Right.
so I think without being I guess careless, you still do have the tendency to go, okay, I got money now, I got to spend it. You find ways to spend it. You can always find ways to spend money. So when you're strapped tight and you know there's no money to spend, you're going to be very, very, very good about finding ways to do it without the extra money.
Sure.
So I do again push for figure out every possible way to bootstrap, just so that you know how to have that grit and just make things work. And I know we're kind of talking all, going all over the place, but
That's okay.
bootstrapping, you start out with that. And I think if you can really, really take advantage of that, learning the ropes, doing research, figuring out everything you can, it puts you in a different category rather than you have a great idea, you go on the stage and pitch and find some money, free money, and then you start spending money right away of somebody else's. I don't know. I think there's a difference.
So I want to get back to the friends and family. I don't want to forget that point, but I want to stick on the VC for just a second. When you got the VC money, did they instruct you to spend it? Did they want you to spend it, or did you feel like you had the opportunity to let that sit there until you figured out the best way to spend it?
Well, the way that I was set up was I had really good, I really can't complain. I had some amazing investors.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky, and I still believe that, at the end of the day, I failed big time financially and lost all that money, and learned a lot, but it's a huge fall where you really have to climb back out. Like it's a very devastating experience. It's almost felt like I was having a heart attack, and truly. And I think it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what the investors really tell you or ask you to do, but it affects you in the ways where that pressure of timeline, and you're moving so fast, and you've never done this before, truly, right? And so, or at least for me, it was one first big,
Well, everybody's got a first time when it
right.
comes to the
So
VC.
it was something all I could do was do the best job I could at that moment. Look at everything, find options, run through it, and hopefully you make the best decision and you
Right.
move forward. That's part of it, right? Who cares if you have the best idea? If you can execute, nothing happens. So, the startup world is about team and execution. And I stress that to anybody who will listen. Don't care if you have an incredible idea. If you don't do anything about it, nobody's going to know, or nobody's going to care. Whereas if you have a decent team, and team meaning it could be a couple of founders or, small group of people that just come together and say, hey, let's try it. If you have a decent team to start working on something, you're going to make it, you're going to tweak it and pivot and hopefully do something where a okay idea could turn into something great. And even with that, with the funding and the what's going on in the world could really change the course, and talk about luck or whatever term you want to use. And things have to kind of fall into place for your product or your service, your baby, to really come to the world and be welcomed and loved, just like you really love,
Absolutely.
right?
Look, I was in your shoes. I had two previous startups before the company that, the tech company that I helped co-found hit. I had two previous startups that fizzled and died. One of them pretty quick. The other one, circumstances beyond our control contributed to it, but it still was, at the end of the day, it didn't get off the ground. So to your point, would you have felt different, less pressure, maybe different kind of pressure if it had been debt financing versus investors?
Yes, absolutely. I think so. Because you're not, but you know, again, I think the tricky part is you've got to have that initial source of revenue in order to get that
Right.
financing. That's
Okay,
the
so
real
maybe
tricky
that's
part.
the wrong way to phrase the question, because if you get the debt financing, you're already sort of on the right track or making
Right,
the revenue.
right. So yes, I think that's the tricky part because it would be wonderful if we could all. So again, you know, going up to the basics of startups, you know, I talk about MVP all the time. You know, you got to find the minimum viable product, get to it as quickly as you can, right? So bootstrapping up to the point where we can get the MVP out and test that sucker with the real customers, even if it means you give them the biggest uh, discount
Discount.
or
Sure.
even free, you know,
Yep.
for whatever foreseeable time to get them signed up. And I think that's where I am now with the current um, company is we have our product, right? I mean, unfortunately, or fortunately, and you know, I have a co-founder, so we are working, and I have not had a co-founder before. So this is a first for me, and there are positives and mostly positives, obviously. But, you know, one thing is that I have to consider her thoughts and concerns.
Sure.
So you know, one thing that I've learned is, yes, it takes even longer when there are two. You move a little bit slower because obviously I've got to consider,
Sure. Yep.
you know, 50% of the decision-making process, you know. So anyway, so it took us, look, for me, from where I sit, it took us a lot longer than I would have liked to be where we are as far as finished product, right? Like,
Right.
because I really learned from my last company that don't try to make it perfect. No, nothing is going to be perfect. So you throw out again, minimum viable product and really test it with the real customers that
Right.
that will pay for your product.
Eventually.
And yes, exactly. So and getting the feedback and having that loop as quickly as possible is really key to success. That's kind of where I wanted to go, and it's been difficult. Product, again, first time more so doing the product company,
Yeah. Well,
especially in healthcare, medical device. It's yeah. So every time, you know, I do something, I'm learning, you know, and that's the process I love.
so are you guys bootstrapping this? Did
Oh
you take
yes,
money? Okay.
yeah.
So this
This
is
has been
entirely bootstrapped.
entirely bootstrapping,
Good.
and we've been lucky because it's not a huge, you know, we didn't need a huge capital to do it.
Yeah.
It's been mostly my time, right? So again, but time is money, and
Mhm.
I have, you know, spent going on almost 3 years on this product, and it's time for us to start bringing in revenue. So it always takes longer, no matter how you look at it.
Right.
You know, you just got to be
And a
patient.
lot of times that's referred to runway. So the
Yeah,
longer it
right.
takes, the longer the
Yes,
runway. And if it's a really long runway, sometimes if the product is more complicated than what you're offering, that's when you definitely need money,
yes, yes,
because it may take more people to develop it, more people to produce it, more people to ship it or handle it, support it, whatever it is. That's usually where the bootstrapping sort of reaches its limitation much faster than 3
absolutely.
years. I mean, the fact that you're able to bootstrap for 3 years is pretty impressive.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
so
and you're absolutely right.
So I'm going to go back to friends and family, because that is usually where a lot of entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, start. Have you ever done friends and family? And two, is that the worst kind of investment or investor for an entrepreneur?
I think yes, mostly yes, because it changed the dynamic, right? I mean, you really don't want to have let's say your uncle, you know, give you $50,000 that he really shouldn't. So you should not ask people, truly. that this is going to make a difference in their lives. Like if you got to think,
If they lose the money, it would
go
hurt.
to people where if they, whatever you ask them to invest in you, whatever the amount, that they can live without that amount for the rest of their lives. You got to think about making a list of people that not only you're close enough, you can ask for help financially, but hey, I'm going to do my best. And you got to have that belief, but know that, do some research so that you know where they sit as financially, and don't ask for people for money when they really want to, if they believe that they're going to get 10x, you really and that's going to be their retirement, then you should not be asking.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's the wrong kind of mindset. That's why when I do my next startup, that's why I'm just coming to you and Evan, because I know I can siphon off a few $1 million and you guys will be fine. No problem.
Yeah, it's I bootstrap mine for the last 2.5 years, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
Right. So help me succeed, and then
Right.
I have
and
some.
then I'll come to you. So to that end, if we have people who are thinking of starting businesses, or people who are already in that realm, because we're recording this in August of 2020, and I'll be honest, there was a good uptick in June and July of 2020 of new startups that came to us. People who either held off starting the business while COVID's initial lockdown went into effect, or just decided, you know what, I need to control my own destiny, and I'm gonna go out on my own. So for the folks watching that, let's say they're doing a service-based business. If they came to you and said, Cory, I need X number of dollars, so now let's put on Cory's investor hat, what would you look for from them? You can be as specific as you want or as general as you want. What would you look for from a service-based business before you and your group would say, okay, we're going to give you, again, X number of dollars?
Again, like how long, like I don't really care for a business plan. I mean, reading a business plan is so dry. And to me, I've written one or more than one.
It's just best guess.
Yeah, I mean, but it is exactly. I mean, after 3 months, it's changed.
Yeah.
Maybe even before 3 months. So to me, that's just showing anyone who cares to invest in you that you have the discipline to pull that off, right? So what I like to see is a truly clear plan and how much they have put into for learning the industry. How is your product or service different from anybody else currently out there? Not necessarily you're the first, but just how are you different? Like what differentiates your product or service from your potential competitors? And really just the homework. I want to see that discipline of how hungry are you? Is this just like, I have an idea and I want to let you hear it, and I think you should invest because it's a really great idea. Like, no, you show me what that means. Show me what's happening around the world that impacts your planning, your timeline, your roadmap. Give me the roadmap just in the next year or two. 6 to 12 months being the most important. What are you doing? What have you done so far? Like that's what, and who's around you? Like who do you have that's going to be working on this together?
Okay, I like that.
What are you putting in? All that.
So, and you're not necessarily just looking for monetary numbers of what they put in, because bootstrapping isn't just about how many dollars you put in. You're also looking for how much effort, how much real effort and smarts have you put into this.
Right. Yeah, and don't come, I mean, just to have an idea, it's not, that you need to go to an incubator. Literally, if you just have an idea, don't try to go raise money. You need to go, whether it is just taking 6 months on your own and making that, building your network within that group or industry that you're in, and connecting with people to learn and make notes and figure out, pros and cons and what's gonna really help you scale your business down the road. Like you got to put all those thoughts on the paper. And I am not a proponent of like going to hit every, accelerator and, startup incubators, but I think at least trying that to network is helpful.
Right.
So yeah.
And everybody can Google the difference between an incubator and an accelerator, because there is a difference. Just because
Yes.
they
Yes.
end in TOR doesn't make them the same. So,
Right.
And we have a limited time on this conversation before we get into the minutia of that. So let's take the other side. If somebody comes to you with a product, again, we're going to assume they've done their market research. They've let's say they've reached a prototype or even beyond. Now that you're running a product-based business, you as the investor, what are you looking for out of a product-based business before you'd say, yes, that is worth my capital?
Yeah, I mean, what we look for is a good fit, right? So our group made of 7 women from all different walks of life, different experiences. So we kind of have to think as a group. We really like to have unanimous vote, but if a couple people can be persuaded, it works well too. We work really well together. Of 7, you would think that 7 very headstrong, strong-willed women, go-getters. I am just tickled that I actually are in a group with 6 women doing this for the last 7-10 years. But anyway, we look for, are we able to help beyond just writing a check? Because our check amounts are so little. So for us, we're trying to help, whether it is literally holding their hands when they're down, to opening doors for introductions to whomever that could help. Sure. And also helping with some HR, operations support, anything that we can help. So we've got to love not only the industry or be interested in it, but love the product or service. So we really look for that fit. We do, it's a small fund that we run with lots of limited partners. So we source a lot of the free advice from our LPs to help with our portfolio companies. So that's kind of what we pride ourselves. We're not, like, again, we write such small checks. That's not what people come to us for. For us,
small checks relative to maybe
right,
the industry
yes.
at whole.
But
it could be a big check for somebody.
For the most part, our checks are pretty small. So we really want to add more value to the company. So we started out, learning the ropes. It was a startup of its own, our little fund, right? So we were learning. So looking back, we make such much, not only better decision now, but just more efficient. It's like we go through the process of looking at somebody comes in, hey, we have this product, it's great. Can you fund us? We look at it, we'll look around and go, are we passionate about that? Are we passionate about this industry, this specific, product? And if we don't, we don't really even listen, because it's not worth giving them our time for all of us. And then, of course, for them, just waste their time knowing that we're really not that interested or passionate about it. So we try to, weed through things faster. And again, we look for a match. And there has been some kind of hope for like learning like healthcare more, just biotech, life sciences. Those are the areas where we don't really have the expertise, but we dabbled into it with some other, sidecar, syndicating deals. So we did do that, but we know for a fact that where we really could add value is truly the most important factor to consider when we look at any sort of new
And I think a lot of people who go out looking for money sort of miss that, what you just talked about, in that just because you get a VC interested doesn't mean it's the right VC for what you're trying to do. And sometimes you have to say no to money
Yes.
uh, in order to save your company.
Yes.
Because believe me, there are way more stories out there of VCs giving money and then basically destroying the company because they didn't work well with the founders or the senior management, or their expectations weren't in alignment. So I think that's a really good point that people should take into account if they are going to look for money. I think also your other really good point is one of the reasons why debt financing sometimes is limited is because the VCs do what you just described. They want to build the company. So they open their Rolodex. They try to find you resources or people or potential clients. They're actually going to do some legwork for you, where if you get the debt financing, they're basically just want to make sure that they're going to get their monthly payment. They're not necessarily making the effort to grow your company because they're leaving that to you. And I think that's another thing that people have to take advantage of when they do come into contact with people like you or organizations like you, who are willing to open up their Rolodex and say, okay, here's what I can help you do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you actually pointed that out, because one thing I always like to remind entrepreneurs is when you actually are asking to speak with a group, do your homework. Make sure you know how that fund works. You know, all the managing partners or general partners that are going to be making the decision, know what makes them happy, know their passion, their background, what they are good, you know, what area they're interested in. It's really important to just kind of have that ammunition, like you got to equip yourself to be able to know, if you're talking to Sean Rourke, you got to know his background, where he worked, what he has, you know, what he has done, whether he has failed, you know, everything about it, as much as possible, not to be creepy, but because you want to be educated, well,
Oh, sure.
educated enough to have a conversation that
Right.
matters to you,
Right.
right? And in the process, you'll find out maybe this is not a good fit. Just like you said, you know,
Yeah.
you don't want to get into bed with somebody who it's not going to work.
Right.
I mean, it's truly a long relationship, and there is good, there is proper and wrong money to take, like you said. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's totally,
Well,
uh,
you've got to think out it. It's a sales job. You're selling yourself or your company, but the only way you're going to know whether or not that person's going to buy is if you know the key words that are going to say, okay, I get it. And if they're going to be a good customer for you.
yes.
Bad customers can do more damage to a company, or to, obviously in this case, to an entrepreneur, than good customers can do good for you.
Right, right. And
So
I've seen, like you said, we had one of our portfolio companies, early one, actually one of the very first one, that has taken a huge amount of money from a nationally known VC, and it literally killed the company.
yeah,
So yes, I echo that. I mean, you
it's
nailed it.
all well and good until you have a lot of chefs in the kitchen, and then all hell breaks loose, and you can't control that.
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
because it really does. It gets out of your control. So, do you like being an entrepreneur that bootstraps, or would you prefer to be an entrepreneur that has access to capital, whether it's through debt financing or VC money?
You know, we know statistically that it's sexy to, you know, to hear VC money, but that's such a really small percentage.
Mhm.
I mean, you hear anywhere between, you know, 5%, I don't know, that truly get the funding, and the rest of the small businesses, and a lot of them are owned by women, right? Um, don't get the funding, number one, and it's they need the loans and the, debt financing to carry on, because some of them are just not designed to go public, right? I mean,
Sure.
because when you actually start a typical sexy startup, you're thinking it's going to go public one day, right? That's what all this hoopla is about, Series A to Series E, and then you go public. That's very small number, or I should say small number of startups.
Sure.
Most of the startups are small business that are, could be lifestyle, whatever, mom and pop shops, maybe 3, 4, 5 stores and or offices, whatever you want to call it. But I do think I really, again, love that financing, again, because it keeps the control of your business, your endeavor, in your hands. Like it's in your hands. You got to make it work, because it's not like you can just easily say, well, I don't have to pay back. I mean, you are signing on the line, and you can't do that over and over again, right? I mean, you hope that most entrepreneurs, you fail a few times, but you constantly get up and you do the next thing, and one day, hopefully it'll hit. You got to have good track record as far as being fair, being honest, and do your best to pay back, whether it's, again, friends and families to VCs and whatnot. You can't continue to just raise a lot of money. Great, you are a great speaker, you can get on the stage and pitch and then have people get excited and you get checks. Well, that can't go on forever. So you got to do your due diligence, work hard, and do your best to pay back so that you can continue to grow and grow your small business to bigger, or even start a new one. You got to have that sort of history of being fair and honest and good.
Well, I will tell you from my point of view, I think there's nothing better than being an entrepreneur. Even if you don't get rich, even if it doesn't work out for you, I think you in a lot of ways, you control so much more of your own destiny in that regard. But I will say this, you will never work harder in your life than running your own shop. If everybody thinks it's just sort of, I'm just the grand master and I'm pointing to employees, and it doesn't work that way, especially in the beginning. You're not pointing to employees, you're pointing to the mirror and saying, get it done.
You're right.
But I tell people all the time, I said, I'd much rather be an entrepreneur that's failed a dozen times than being an employee that hasn't left the company in 30 years, but haven't really accomplished anything.
Well, you have to admit, we're different animals. I mean,
we're
because
a bit
it's
nuts.
a glutton for punishment, right? I mean,
you're
not going to succeed every time. Certainly, even if you are just lucky and good and you do all the right things, there are times when it's just not going to go your way. So I think we are wired very differently, and even with crazy mindset of, yes, I'm going to work my butt off, there is no life besides my work. Things get thrown at you where it changes kind of your priorities, and I don't know, you learn to do it differently each time. You hope that you don't make the same mistakes, or at least learn from the last mistake, and then hopefully that you can do better. But we just keep getting up. You get knocked down, you get back up, you get stronger. And I think, eventually you really do. That's just in your DNA, I think. You just keep doing it. And for some others, I mean, thankfully for me, my husband is not an entrepreneur. Thank you for that. It wouldn't work if we both were. So I am grateful for people that are not, because I can't imagine. I'm just like you. I'm like, there's no way I can work for somebody. I mean, I just can't. I'm just too headstrong, and I see what I want to do, and I need to do it that way, rather than, I love to listen to ideas, but I certainly have, I want to lead. I don't I'm just not a good follower,
Yeah.
you know, for work, for my career, for what I'm working on. Not, I can be an Indian, you know, any day for certain projects, but not for working on you know, career path. Like
Yep.
it's, yeah, I'm with you. Like I can't
I,
imagine.
I do a lot of mentoring, especially kids who eventually want to start their own business. And I tell them all the time, I said, I was a great worker.
Hmm.
I was a terrible employee because I questioned everything. And
Right.
what I realized very early on, in fact, my very first job out of college is that I wanted to be the general. I didn't want to be the soldier.
Yes.
And so I've always talked about having that man or woman in the mirror test. The easiest person to lie to is that reflection. And if you can be brutally honest as to what really motivates you, is it money? Is it toys?
Right.
Is it power? Is it changing the world? Or in my case, it was just being in control.
Mm.
To your point, I say whatever I think is the best way to go. That's the way we go. And so, as opposed to being the employee who gets told this is the way we're going, and you have to accept it at some point.
Yeah.
If you're a soldier, you have to accept it. So yeah, that was my thing. I know we've deviated a little bit from financing, but I think it's a good message to give people know what really motivates you. And
Right.
if you're like Evan, Cory's husband, who's the other friend who I can count in decades, he's much more laid back than we are.
Oh
And,
gosh, yes. And
so,
just more, I don't know, level-headed, maybe? Not so.
yeah, maybe. Well, I don't know.
He doesn't get all fired up.
Yeah, he
You know,
doesn't
we
get fired
get
up.
fired up about things, whether
Yes.
it's just an idea or just an opinion. You know, we get all passionate and heaven's sakes, you know, if we can have a quiet
Well,
argument.
Evan's passion is for you and your kids, where
Yes.
your passion are for them, but also for what you want to accomplish. So I think it's good to be honest with yourself, and you said it.
Yes, I'm
You
lucky.
have to be a different breed if you're
Yes.
willing to take that risk.
But it's worth it. And I do.
Oh, absolutely.
I always say the same thing, and I go, you know what? Try it. You would never know until you try it, right?
Exactly. Hey,
And
the
you will
worst that
learn
can
something.
happen is like me. When my second startup failed, I had to move back in with my parents for a bit.
Yep.
So, but it worked out, and the third one hit, and that's just the way it went.
Yep. That's awesome. Third one, actually 3 is good. You know, average, I believe is 5 to 6.
Well, we'll see. Then that means I still got a lot of failing to do before my next one. So
That gives you grace period.
yeah. Well, I'm running out of life runway. So let's be honest about that. So hey, this was fantastic. We've already hit 45 minutes.
Awesome.
I knew we would, simply because of your experience and your insights into this. So again, thank you very much for doing this. And I cannot wait to see you guys actually in person.
I know. Thank you. I'm honored to be to be invited to do this.
It was my pleasure. And so for everybody watching, Cory will send links that she wants to share, and they'll all be in the description below. Again, for Cory Allison, I'm Sean O'Rourke. Thank you for joining us on Did You Know That? ? And if you enjoyed the conversation or any others that you've seen, make sure you hit the subscribe button with the bell so that it's automatically populated into your feed. And until next time, this is us signing off. Cheers.